Time to tune up Washington's primaries. Once the most innovative in the nation, the top 2 model is showing cracks. Here's how the evergreen state can upgrade.
On September 4, 2024, Democrats across Washington state let out a collective sigh of relief. A recount of the primary election finally confirmed that one of their own, then-King County Councilor Dave Upthegrove, would appear on the November ballot. Even though Democrats had won 270,000 more votes than Republicans in the primary for Commissioner of Public Lands, Upthegrove squeaked into second place by just 49 votes. This math story problem gone awry is a hiccup of Washington's top 2 primaries, in which the 2 candidates with the most votes, regardless of party, square off in the general election. Democratic voters split their majority 5 ways, allowing 2 Republicans to float toward the top of the pool with a combined 43% of the vote. Only the narrowest of margins spared blue-leaning Washington an all-Republican ticket in the general election. It wouldn't have been the first time. So do Washington's nonpartisan top 2 primaries need to go? Certainly not. 2 decades of research point to their overall positive impact on elections and governance. Compared with the 47 states that use partisan primaries, the top 2 model has a depolarizing effect on lawmakers, gives candidates an incentive to appeal to wider audiences, and turns out a more representative electorate. But while Washingtonians could claim for years to be leading the pack on primary reform, the top 2 model has also stumbled, occasionally producing backward results and unfavorable conditions for third parties. Since 2020, Alaska's top 4 primaries and ranked choice general elections have avoided top 2's tripping points while still retaining and building on its positive qualities. Washington's not down and out by any means. With a simple top 4 or top 5 tune-up, evergreen state voters could get the same results.
Top 2 primaries, a step in the right direction.
In 2004, Washington voters approved Initiative 872, which created top 2 unified or nonpartisan primaries. In these races, all candidates appear on the ballot together and the top 2 vote-getters, of any party, advance to the general election. California adopted the model 6 years later. Most states hold partisan primaries, which are exclusive to candidates of a given major party and tend to produce combative campaigns and extreme legislators. But reformers theorized that unifying the races, i.e., making them nonpartisan and allowing all voters to participate, would produce more moderate legislators who better represented the majority of voters. They were right. Political polarization stabilized in the California and Washington legislatures post-reform, while the problem worsened in most states with partisan primaries. Why such a dramatic difference? For one thing, unified primaries tend to turn out more voters that better represent the overall electorate than partisan primaries, which skew older, whiter, wealthier, and, some researchers suggest, more ideologically extreme than those who show up for general elections. Because Washington's unified primary voters look more like the general voting public than most other states, candidates and lawmakers have caused to court voters from all sides, not just a narrow base, to secure one of the top 2 spots. Another key element is that the top 2 candidates, regardless of party, advance out of the primary. 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans can face off in the general election if an area skews heavily toward either party. Voters of the dominant party get more options in the general election, while voters in the political minority can sometimes play kingmaker, putting a more moderate candidate over the top. There's no better illustration of the dynamics top 2 has introduced than Washington's 4th congressional district. About 60% of voters in the district backed Donald Trump in 2016, 2020, and 2024. But Representative Dan Newhouse, one of only 2 U.S. House Republicans to vote to impeach Donald Trump and win re-election in 2022, has won out over a more conservative fellow Republican in 3 separate elections. Under partisan primaries, Newhouse would likely lose to more extreme candidates, who would square off against the single Democratic nominee in the general election, winning easily, despite being the first choice of only a tiny fraction of voters. The district may be far more red than blue, but given a choice between 2 Republicans, District 4 voters consistently prefer Newhouse.
But there have been bumps in the road.
For all its exciting properties, the top 2 model has exhibited a few unexpected defects. Voters sometimes get stuck choosing between candidates that don't represent their state or district. Contests between 2 candidates of the same party can prompt a segment of voters to skip a race on their ballot entirely. And despite good intentions, the top 2 model may be draining support for third parties.
When one party divides, the other conquers, not always in the way voters want.
Though top 2 skews toward electing partisans with broad appeal to residents of a state or district, sometimes the opposite happens. Once in a while, top 2 produces a spoiler-like situation in which a heavily Democratic electorate gets stuck picking between 2 Republicans, or vice versa. Dave Upthegrove may have squeaked through a splintered primary to the 2024 general election, but Washington Democrats haven't always been so lucky. Take, for example, the Washington State Treasurer election of 2016. The Democratic majority, 52% of primary voters, split their vote between 3 candidates in the primary, so 2 Republicans advanced to the general election, despite having fewer overall voters in their corner. For the next 4 years, Washington had a Republican treasurer against the likely preference of most voters. And it's not just a Democratic problem. Republicans cried foul when Washington voters got no Republican options in the general election after the divided 2020 primary for lieutenant governor, even though there was a Republican candidate for governor.
Some voters who don't like their choices simply give up and move on.
Call it the dilemma of the peckish. Pop open the refrigerator looking for a treat, and there's nothing inside that catches your eye. Now, a dedicated snacker might pick between less than ideal options even if they're not in the mood. But somebody who's not that hungry is more likely to just close the door and walk off. Turns out, about 7% of voters feel the same way about their ballots. Even though they have their pick between 2 candidates, they'd rather roll off and abstain from voting entirely when they see 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans in a race, compared with 2 or more party contests. In same candidate elections where the margin of victory is below 7 percentage points, like the narrow 2 Democrat race for State Senate District 35 in 2018, one can't help but wonder if those abstaining voters might have changed the outcome.
Third parties are getting iced out.
Third-party and independent candidates tend to perform worse under the top 2 model than in partisan primary states, in which they can sometimes appear on the general election ballot. It's not hard to see why. When only 2 candidates can advance out of primaries, they're almost always Democrats or Republicans. Voters who might be inclined to support a third party in the primary generally recognize the slim odds of success and go for one of the 2 major parties instead. Of course, the impact on election outcomes has been minimal, as third parties rarely win elections anyway. However, with reduced access to the ballot, non-mainstream candidates don't just lose the slim chance they have of seeing success. They no longer get even the awareness-boosting exposure of participating in general elections. In a country deeply divided between 2 parties, almost 60% of Americans yearn for a third option. Unfortunately, Washington's current primary model may not get there. In the words of Unite America Democracy fellow Richard Barton,
for those who believe that a healthy political system requires more than 2 parties, top 2 may actually be worsening American democracy.
The Alaska model, new and improved.
Alaska's top 4 primaries share the benefits of top 2's unified primary concept. Allowing all voters and all candidates to participate means better turnout, a more representative slice of the electorate, and incentives for candidates to appeal beyond their base. But advancing 4, or, as some reformers suggest, 5 candidates, rather than 2, plus using ranked choice voting in the general election, is how Alaska's model fixes what top 2 doesn't get quite right. For starters, when 4 candidates advance from the primary, there's little to no chance that any area will produce a one-party ballot, so long as more than one party runs for office. Compared with advancing 2 candidates, there are simply greater odds that at least one will be a good match for any given voter in their state or district. So those voters who are inclined to skip single-party races, they'll rarely have occasion to do so. Meanwhile, those third-party and independent candidates who get locked out of general elections under top 2 have greater odds of advancing in a top 4 primary, and under ranked choice voting, voters have more reason to vote for them. In a pick-one contest, a voter might avoid wasting their vote on someone outside the 2 major parties lest they spoil the election. Ranked choice voting ensures that voters can express their true preference, and if their preferred candidate gets eliminated, their vote simply transfers to their next favorite choice, unwasted. Despite occasional hiccups, Washington's top 2 primary has improved who gets to meaningfully vote and how lawmakers govern. But the evergreen state wouldn't be tossing away decades of progress if it were to upgrade to the Alaska model. In adopting 4 or 5 winner primaries and ranked choice general elections, Washingtonians would be tuning up their well-loved, but not always reliable primary. They'd be fashioning it into something more functional, efficient, and dependable, while reclaiming their spot in the front of the pack.